The Ethics of Eating workshop that I participated in was organized by ELCA World Hunger, and these facts about 1.4 billion people that live in extreme poverty, that in the United States 50 million people are food insecure, 46.2 million Americans are living in poverty. Thinking about our food system, we need to think about it being part of this broader context. And I really like this acronym READ that the ELCA World Hunger Program has come up with. So it includes relief, education, advocacy, and development. So today we're kind of engaging, and our whole series has been about education. I think that I was encouraged that we also engage in advocacy and try and think about how we can develop a more socially just food system. I think that we've got a wonderful example of relief, which is really important in our interfaith rotating winter shelter. And so in sharing my own food and faith journey, I wanted to talk about things that I found meaningful in our community in terms of how I can participate. I love the fact that we prepare food that we would serve our own families in our own homes and share that with members of our community. We sit down at tables together and eat together with needy members of our community. I think that's awesome. I wanted to say that our choices affect one another. This is a quote from Martin Luther King's Christmas sermon on peace. It really boils down to this, that all life is interrelated. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied into a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. And for part of that thinking is kind of what makes me react to this particular example. There was a study done on where you're more likely to be exposed to pesticides. If you were eating strawberries or celery or raspberries, it might be harder to wash the pesticides off. But you're safe if it's an avocado because you can just take off the peel and you'll be okay. And it's this really individualistic thinking about risk, as opposed to there's farm workers that are being exposed to the pesticides, they're getting into our water and soil. It's like that. I don't like that approach, and I think that the Martin Luther King quote reflects what I dislike about it. I also want to say that there's limits to ethical consumerism, that we're more than just consumers of food. It's not just about making good choices when you buy stuff. That we reproduce and sustain, or we challenge and alter our food system through our participation in it. And in the 13 years I've lived in Davis, I've been exposed to the fact that Davis is a wonderfully rich place to get involved and gain deeper understanding of our food system. There's an abundance here if you want to get engaged. So there's tons of free public seminars on campus at UC Davis. There's lots of interesting research on agroecology and permaculture and integrated pest management. Over 85% of the land in Yolo County is used for agriculture. There's large-scale farms, there's small farms. We've got a very rich community food history. We've got a 40-year-old food cooperative. We've got one of the most established farmers markets. We've got lots of local food entrepreneurs. We've got community gardens. Even the UC Davis Sustainable Agriculture major was initiated by students. That was started by the Students for Sustainable Agriculture. They pushed for it to administrators, and the major was created. I think many of you are familiar with community-supported agriculture, but if you're not, I wanted to share it with you. It's a social and economic model of agriculture and food distribution in which growers and consumers share the risks and benefits of food production. And here's some examples of CSA baskets. And if you ever had an interest in joining a CSA, there's a list here. This is from the Davis Wiki page of local CSAs. I've had a CSA from the Full Circle Farm out in West Davis and the Student Farm, where students here on campus learn how to grow food. And you get this big basket, once a week or every 2 weeks, and it's full of stuff that was harvested that day. And I remember as a graduate student living in shared housing, having 3 roommates and living on a student stipend and having student loan debt, and I felt incredibly wealthy. I felt rich when I would get my CSA basket. And, I couldn't screw it up. I'd make new dishes, I'd experiment with vegetables and herbs and things I had never tried before, and I would share it with my roommates and my neighbors, and it wound up tasting delicious because it was just so fresh and flavorful. And I started eating seasonally, and I, it really made me a better cook. There's even a fish CSA at Davis. This was started by my friend Anna Larson. You can pick up your fish at the food co-op. And this is to encourage more sustainable fishing practices. I think that there's been this resistance, especially you can see it in Davis, to suburbia and the lack of seeing land as a place where you can grow stuff. The top left picture is from Edward Scissorhands, the pastel houses and the perfectly manicured lawns. And why would you ever think of actually growing food, in your front or backyard? We live on some of the richest soil that anywhere, and we think about wanting to protect farmland and not have suburban sprawl grow out into all of the farmland that's surrounding us. Even if you don't have your own yard, we've got lots of community gardens where you can get a plot and grow collectively and hang out with your community members. So that's what's captured in this eat your yard idea and edible landscaping. And even more than that, if you don't like the way eggs are produced and chickens are treated, you can have your own backyard chicken coop. Some places that's not even legal. People think that's objectionable. But Davis has gone to celebrating it even with our annual Tour de Cluck, which is a lot of fun, which is a very Davis thing. You can ride your bike around Davis and tour your neighbors' chicken coops. And it was even featured in the New York Times. So this bottom picture here, the woman at the microphone, is Jake. She helped organize this. That colorful chicken coop down at the bottom belonged to my neighbors Stacy and Lucas, and I loved just taking over my, the tops of my carrots and my strawberries and getting eggs from them. It created a nice sense of neighbor exchange and community. This Tour de Cluck benefits YOLO Farm to School, which gets school kids more involved in learning about where their food comes from, improving the quality of their school lunches, and reducing the waste. There's also YOLO Farm to Fork. If you wanted, you could see coming up here. In February, they need help harvesting broccoli. There's a lot of interesting ways to get engaged. Another resource, if you care about our waste and how much of it winds up in the landfills, and you ever wanted to compost and you don't know how, there's Project Compost at UC Davis where you can learn how to compost and create wonderfully rich stuff for your garden. Another fun thing that I wanted to highlight is the Hose Down Festival in the Capay Valley. That's in the fall. The first day is this wonderful festival with lots of food and music and entertainment, and the kids love it. And the second day is full of really informative educational seminars. I heard from an organic strawberry grower who managed to do cultivars that were also organic, and from an entomologist on campus who was talking about beneficial insects. And so lots of cool stuff to learn. I also wanted to highlight the issue of food access in Yolo County and the role of Yolo County Supervisor Don Saylor. He's really taken this on during his tenure as county supervisor. He hosts this annual Soups-On, which will be the end of this month at St. James Church. It benefits elderly nutrition program Meals on Wheels in Yolo County. He held this really informative day on food access here. There's some statistics here about obesity rates, the number of kids that are on subsidized lunches. Obviously, there's a policy component to this, increasing access to SNAP benefits, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and even how that could create wealth in the community, that there's a lot of folks who are eligible for these benefits and don't access them, sometimes because of not knowing about them or social shame. But that there are more resources that are underutilized in Yolo County than should be. We have the Lutheran Church is engaged in public advocacy. We have our Lutheran Office of Public Policy. The director, Mark Carlson, is awesome. He helped lead our Food and Faith Farm Tour. I pulled this from the LCA World Hunger website, that we believe that government and elected officials play an essential role. We encourage funding that helps people who need food, housing, and health care. We encourage protection of the land and waters that people rely on for food and livelihood by speaking with and on behalf of those who are hungry through advocacy. ELCA World Hunger works to change the systems that perpetuate poverty. And, I had this quote from Proverbs that I think illustrates how that's something that we as people of faith are charged to do, that the field of the poor may yield much food, but it is swept away through injustice. And I think that justice is a really important part of what we need to be doing in our food system. Why is there so much inequality in our food system, and there are those who have critiqued the growing consolidation in the agri-food industry. There's just a handful of firms like ConAgra and Nestle and Kraft and General Mills that produce most of our processed foods. There's an illusion of choice when we go to the grocery store. We see all these different brands, which are actually purchasing from the same company. ConAgra produces Healthy Choice, Hunt's, Orville Redenbacher, Chef Boyardee, Swiss Miss, Marie Callender's, Wesson, Hebrew National, Egg Beaters, Libby's, just as an example. And I think that reflects part of my own desire in my food and faith journey to get more involved in the Davis Food Co-op. For those of you who are not that familiar with the Davis Food Co-op, it is guided by the principles of the cooperative movement, which include voluntary and open membership, democratic member control, member economic participation, autonomy and independence, education, training, and information, cooperation amongst cooperatives, and concern for community. And part of that democratic member control is reflected in the fact that we have annual elections where you can, elect representatives to the board. You can run for the board if you're a member of the co-op, which I did. All the board meetings are open to the public. The minutes are posted on the website. You get 1 vote per member or household. The next annual membership meeting where you can hear from candidates who are running for the board will be held in May. And I think it's helpful to think about, a corporate-owned grocery chain like Whole Foods or Safeway versus a member-owned cooperative. The first priority of the CEO of an investor-owned grocery store is to, maximize shareholder value versus the general manager of the food co-op has to abide by the ends that are crafted by the board. And the board is supposed to be reflecting the values of their membership and making sure that the general manager acts accordingly. So these are the ends of the Davis Food Co-op. We exist so that our current and future member owners, and there's about 10,000 Davis households, have, and beyond the membership of the co-op, but also people in the community have a thriving, cooperatively owned business, access to healthful, sustainable, higher quality, locally grown and produced foods, a retail store that satisfies customers, an improved environment and a more sustainable food system, and education that leads to informed choices about health, food systems, the environment, and cooperatives. So some examples of that end, that goal of, so these are things that we're trying to pursue: access to healthful, sustainable, higher quality, locally grown foods. We've got product sourcing from over 600 local vendors. There's complexity in that. Putting out checks to pay all of those individual vendors versus buying from one major consolidator requires organizational resources, but that is, a form of resistance to the consolidation that's happening in our food system. We promote local foods and products through in-store labeling and events so you can make choices to support locally produced products. One thing that I had never been exposed to as a kid growing up was, shopping in bulk. Actually, I taught my mom how to shop in bulk. She never done it. So she taught me how to do a lot of my grocery shopping, but I taught her. She's like, how do you do this? And, you show up with your own containers. If you care about food waste and you decide to invest in your own containers and you weigh them on the scale and you do the tare, you can then put your own stuff in. There's, you're not throwing away all that packaging. It was kind of looking at other shoppers in the co-op. It was like, oh, I don't have to individually bag all of my produce in plastic bags. It's okay if it goes down the conveyor belt and it's not in plastic. We can bring our own bags. A lot of these are simple things. And it kind of makes you a little more conscious as you're making these types of choices.